So speak life, when the sun won't shine and you don't know why. Look into the eyes of the broken hearted, watch them come alive as soon as you speak hope, you speak love, you speak life.
Hi, and welcome to Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker. We're so glad you stepped on the bus today. This is a show that airs every single week. We feature guests who have been through struggles, through difficulties, and they found their way to victory and also a very much deepened faith. We also feature guests who are called to help others, and that's what this day is all about. If you're going through struggles, I want you to understand that there's help right at your fingertips. God's there. Faith is not a feeling, it's a choice. And if you choose to believe that there is a God who is strong enough to carry you through your problems, to change things, to make miracles, He will help you. The strength of faith can kind of be like roots on a tree. I have a tree in the front of my house that grew by itself, what they call a volunteer. And it is at the edge of a garden in our front yard. And it just started growing and growing and growing. And my wife says, okay, now it's too close to the garden, it's too close to the house. But by the time I start digging, the roots are very deep. And it's difficult to get out. And that's what faith is like. If you have struggles, allow those struggles to deepen and strengthen the roots of your faith. The deeper your roots, the stronger your faith can become. Now, if you didn't have struggles, your roots won't go deep. So don't try to avoid and dislike and get angry about struggles. Allow them to grow you. All right, I promised our day is about people who help. With me is Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley from the Helen Ross McNabb Center. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Glad to have you along. The Helen Ross McNabb Center is widespread. It has so many programs, and your program is specific in one area. But Mary, will you tell us a little bit about the various programs available at Helen Ross McNabb?
Sure. We have a pretty robust continuum for children's services in particular, but we also provide services for adults, housing services, and some drug and alcohol services as well. But I'd like to highlight the children and youth programs. We have several divisions, one of which the Therapeutic Preschool falls into, which is our early intervention and prevention programs.
Okay.
Another division that we have is what you would really consider as your traditional outpatient mental health services. So your psychiatric services, therapy services, and just what we would consider intake, where you really get to know a person coming through your doors. We also provide services for drug and alcohol for adolescents, and we have a variety of foster care services that include residential services.
Oh my, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then we also have a division that specializes in children and family services. So we're pretty diverse. I would say that the Helen Ross McNabb Center probably has the biggest children's continuum in the area.
Okay.
We have really set ourselves apart in that manner. We believe that helping children and families can make the biggest impact, and the earlier that you can touch those families and children, the better outcomes you have long term.
Right. Children are a blessing, and they, as parents, they are our focus. But no one ever said it was easy, and there's no instruction book. Kristin, you are part of. Tell me your role.
So my role is I'm the services coordinator for our prevention and early intervention services at the Helen Ross McNabb Center. I oversee our early childhood programming and our early family programming, particularly the Therapeutic Preschool. So usually the programs that I oversee are programs that serve anywhere from 0 to 6 years old. That can include the preschool. It can include behavior management type programs, parenting classes, along with our Healthy Families program that also supports first-time moms And then also we have some basic outpatient services as well for the younger population.
So that's still a lot of things in one umbrella.
Yes.
Right. So this is not, where is your program located?
We are located at downtown Knoxville at 600 Arthur Street at our Children and Youth Center.
Okay.
And that's where the majority of our programs are housed, with the exception of some of our foster care services and some of our larger family type services. You'll find a lot of our services at that location. That would be kind of where someone could reach out to get help if they needed it.
Okay, perfect. So on a global level, what would cause you to be a child to be on your radar?
That can come from a different variety. Usually the children that will kind of become a part of our radar, especially for my division, is the child that maybe is acting out aggressively or having pretty severe tantrums, and there's not a known cause. The family or a teacher or someone in the community is like, what's happened? We call it easily triggered. And we are trying to figure that out. Where is that coming from? Is it coming from a traumatic event? Is it coming from they're holding a big emotion and they don't know how to communicate that? And that's usually the kids that kind of grab our attention and say, okay, what's happening here? What's going on? How can we help?
Okay.
Tom, I would just also add that sometimes it takes children like that to come through our center to really be able to identify that there is an additional need. A lot of these families are just so overwhelmed that they find that as a normal part of their day, a child responding that way.
Right.
Either it's their first or second child. So if it's their first child, they may not understand any differently. They kind of grew up in the same environment.
Okay.
They had the same types of behaviors or responses. So it can be kind of a normal thing to these families. So sometimes it does take kind of an external person like a teacher that Kristin mentioned, or a therapist when they come through our center to really identify, that there might be a bigger need for the family as a whole.
Somebody might be at their wit's end, but they think that's normal.
Right.
Wow. Now, to be fair, I asked Kristin what her role is, and Mary, I didn't ask what yours is.
To be fair.
Yes.
I am the senior director for our children and youth mental health programming. So a lot of our children's programs in Knoxville fall under my supervision. So I have 3 different managers that take on specialty divisions that help run our children's services, and I help manage all that and start up programs and things like that.
You're a juggler.
I like to be a juggler.
Yes,
She's a good one.
Perfect. So, and it seems so worthwhile because parents sometimes just do not know where to turn, or they don't even, like you pointed out, they don't even know that something's wrong. So what, I guess first is trying to discover what's going on. What are some of the ways that I mean, I don't want to give away your industry secrets or anything, but I mean, what would you try to do? I mean, kids don't just come out and say it.
No.
Well, here's what's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I know kids, mine especially, they just don't say, they don't understand.
Right. One of the things when a family does kind of come to the center, one of the things we try to focus on is that the parent or guardian's the expert. And they're the ones, they know that child very well, and they know when there's a change in behavior or when a behavior has gotten extreme. So it's usually, again, it's a partnership with the teachers and the parents or someone in the community that's kind of said, hey, maybe let's look into this. Let's see what's kind of going on. Something's changed, something's different.
Okay.
They come to the center. We have what we call a center-wide intake, and they start there, and they meet with a master's level clinician that kind of just does the assessment part, kind of seeing what's going on, what's the history, what's the family dynamics. We get kind of a medical history along with the educational history. And all of those factors play a part in probably what's going on. And then from there, we can direct them to the variety of services that we have at the center.
Wow. Now, I guess some parents might be nervous to bring it outside of the family, because you hear these horror stories of Department of Human Services or something just nabbing the kid, and that's not your intent at all.
Absolutely not. What we know is that families, it's hard being a parent these days.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure it is.
Kids do not come with a handbook. The world is changing constantly around us. And our goal is to really work with the family dynamics and really work on those and giving the family the tools and the support that they need to help work through that process and to grow stronger together. So we definitely want to work with the families.
Right. You want to improve the family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, family preservation is definitely our goal. Now, when there's, a situation where that may not be the ultimate outcome, we work with the families to let them know that that's what's going to happen. I mean, we never want to surprise a family or,
Sure.
It's all about the therapeutic relationship and having that trust moving forward. Because after the fact, you still want to engage these families in services. At the end of the day, that's really what they need to be able to be reunified or whatever their situation is. So it's very important for us to be very transparent with families and be as supportive as possible. But our ultimate goal would be to preserve any type of family that we could.
Or improve.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, not to get too specific, but what are some of the problems that you run into that cause behavioral issues, or I guess some of that someone would need help with?
Yeah, well, that can be a variety of different issues, especially for our 0 to 5, 6-year-olds. It could be just what we call toxic stress. So there's a lot of stress maybe going in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Families trying to make ends meet. Both mom and dad are working. They're kind of having to be overwatched by their older brother or sister. That can kind of cause some what we call toxic stress. And that's just that high stress environment for no reason other than just life happening.
Yeah, and kids aren't necessarily wired to deal with that.
Yes. It can also be unknown developmental delay. So maybe a child's struggling to understand or process their world, and it becomes frustrating. So that may come out in their behavior sometimes. And sometimes it's just how we're wired. Sometimes we are just strong-headed individuals from the start, and we just need a little more structure or a little more guidance to kind of show how to generate that energy in a positive way rather than the defiant way.
Right. One of the things that I'm very passionate about, and the book that I have, One Dog's Faith, deals a lot with, is worry. And you talked about it, that there's so much stress and so much worry in our environment, in our society. Everybody's trying desperately to make ends meet, but one of the things I believe is very difficult is some kids think that's normal. Some kids see their parents just with their brows frowned all the time, stressing and just going this way and that way all the time. What do kids do with that?
It can cause a lot of stress. You'll see a lot of the behaviors coming out in that. And every child is different. So every child will respond to those situations differently. So we can't necessarily say, well, every child is going to do X, Y, and Z if they're in that situation. Right. But what we know is kind of that stress and that worry and the kind of the burden that parents take on as, taking care of their families sometimes can affect probably the bonding and the attachment relationship.
Okay.
Because, it kind of comes down to, I'm about to start my third job in an hour. I really don't have time to sit down and play and do a puzzle with you right now. Not that they don't want to, but, again, trying to make those ends meet and keep going. Sometimes those things that are still important in that parent-child relationship kind of get put off the side because they're not an urgent priority.
I see.
And I think if you can imagine a situation like that, a child is just in constant flight mode. So when you think about somebody's anxiety, it's just constant for that child, if you can just kind of think of that overwhelming feeling. So There's no way to self-regulate is what we would call it. So there's no way to soothe. There's no way to kind of decompress. They don't know how because it's such a constant state. And there's no one there to really impact that state to help them soothe and help them learn how to self-regulate. So you're just constantly on the edge of this fight or flight situation. So instead of what we might know as that being normal in situations where you might need to fight or flight. This child may be in that constant state at all times, and there's no difference for them no matter what the situation is.
Wow.
They've been kind of pushed into a situation where, you know, they're promoted as little bitty adults because of their environments and what their situations
They
are.
had to grow up way too fast.
That's exactly right.
Wow. We're talking with Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley of the Helen Ross McNabb Center, the Therapeutic Preschool program. We're barely scratching the surface of what this program does and who it helps and the passion behind it. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, and we'll deal with more in just a minute.
Sweet creature, had another talk about where it's going wrong, but we're still young. We don't know where we're going, but we know we belong.
Oh, so everyone who's hit their limit, it's not over yet, it's not over yet. Hope is rising, never give in, never give up, it's not over.
You're listening to Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. That's a book about faith and life and trust and worry through the eyes of a dog. Everybody loves dogs, right? Well, this is views from my dog, her perspective on why dogs do some of the silly things they do, and also why we humans are so silly in their eyes. One Dog's Faith. It's available through Amazon. It's available through BarnesandNoble.com, Cokesbury.com, and locally Cedar Springs Bookstore, Long's Drug Store, Farragut Pharmacy, to name only a few. There's lots more. With me in the studio today from the Helen Ross McNabb Center, Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley. So glad to have you guys here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You're part of the Therapeutic Preschool, part of Helen Ross McNabb, and we've already talked a little bit about your program. But one thing, as a parent, I've got three teenage daughters and one son, so all of them are completely different. But one thing that seems to be very consistent is when they're young, and whether we're busy as parents or whatever the situation might be, if a child believes that they need attention, or they believe that they just haven't had enough attention on them, they won't just come out and say, "Hey, I need attention." They'll act it out, right? Just break a rule to get in trouble, or worse. I mean, Mary, talk about your experience with that.
Well, we definitely see that as very common. The majority of the population that we work with probably tends to stay on the negative extreme of attention, only because their environments are already so hectic that that is really the only thing they can get attention with. Mom or dad or whoever their legal guardian is at the time is just so overwhelmed with daily stressors that any type of attention is good attention when it comes to...
Even if you're in trouble.
That's exactly
Sure.
right, because someone is paying attention to me. Even if I just broke the rule, even if I just hurt myself, even if I just hurt my sibling, or even if I just hurt my pet dog. It's anything that can get a response that I can be acknowledged for.
So, yes, I can see that as being normal, but it can also get out of hand.
It definitely can get out of hand. And I think every situation is definitely a little different depending on a parent's response and what is going on in their daily life for that moment. You can have a family that might be ultimately at their, already at their threshold and just responds very quickly, can respond somewhat aggressively, because that's what they know to do in that moment. And then the next day, the same situation can happen. And depending on the circumstances, that parent can respond completely different because their stressors are just different for that moment. Sure.
So, Kristin, I'd love to hear, we've talked globally about the program, but get a little more specific about the it's called Therapeutic Preschool. And it sounds like a classroom, but it's not.
No, our therapeutic preschool program is actually an intensive outpatient program. And what that means is our clients come to the center 3 times a week for 3 hours. And that curriculum usually lasts about 10 weeks. So we're seeing the kids for 3 days a week for 10 weeks.
Okay.
The particular therapeutic preschool program is designed to work with children ages 4 to 6 who have experienced any kind of significant trauma. So we're talking about abuse or neglect, witnessing domestic violence, experiencing a natural disaster. We've had clients who have been in a very tragic car accident before, or had a very significant loss in their family, whether it be a parent or a sibling.
So they're kind of like a child version of post-traumatic stress.
Exactly.
Or is it that?
And it is how a 4 to 6 year old would present post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we know is between the ages of 4 and 6, the brain is firing off and developing, right? And if we do not intervene at the time that trauma happens, those stressors, those triggers from that trauma will continue to create that stress hormone in the brain. And then their stress response, much like what Mary was talking about earlier, that flight response continues to stay on. Almost like an alarm clock going off in your brain constantly.
Cannot be healthy.
Yeah. And so our goal is to really give our clients a set of tools to know what to do in a scary situation, to be able to put words with their emotions. We have a lot of kids that come in with very heavy feelings. We call them heavy feelings because for a 4-year-old, angry, it's a heavy feeling.
Yeah, sure,
and it's got to come out somehow.
Right. You can be angry for 3 or 4 minutes and then get over it, or you can be angry.
Yes. And so we try to help them work through that process. We have what we call a least restrictive environment in our preschool. And what that means is we have the ability with our staff to really give that child the individual time and attention and guidance that they need to work through those emotions. And by the time they graduate our program, our goal is that they can say, this makes me feel really sad, or this makes me feel really angry. I need to go blow bubbles, or I need to hug my teddy bear.
But they can kind of pinpoint a little more.
They can start pinpointing. I always say we as adults can sometimes barely identify our own emotions of why we're upset.
Yes, I was going to say that because I don't. How do you?
I can only imagine what a 4 and 6 year old is going through.
So I guess some of the things you might do, I guess, is draw with them, or what are some of your tools?
Well, just like how kids communicate their emotions, they communicate them through actions. So your tantrums, your fits. They also learn through action and play. So our curriculum is very much created around their age-appropriate developmental abilities. A lot of hands-on activities. We do a lot of stories, engaging with stories. We bring puppets into the classroom. We have art that relates back to the topic that day. We provide different coping skills for them. We have sensory balls that they can roll on to kind of calm them down. We have stress balls, those kind of things, to introduce those to them. The movie Inside Out has been great because kids know what it is, and it's a great way to kind of help them identify those emotions. We teach them different ways to communicate that. Like if they don't want to say it verbally, we have a poster where they can move their name that day and say, this is where I'm feeling.
Yeah. I just wanted to take sad and say, stop it. Yeah. Smile once in a while.
Yeah, right. So we kind of do that through that. And then again, when we see that they come in, we acknowledge their feelings. Like, Johnny, I see that you're happy today. Why are you happy? Or they come in, they throw their backpack in their cubby. We're like, oh, Tom, I see that you're mad today. What's made you mad?
Sure.
And by saying that with them and identifying it, that kind of turns that light bulb on and says, oh, that's what mad is. That's what mad feels like. Or, oh, that's what sad feels like. To help them kind of start making those connections.
Okay.
Well, and I would add that, a lot of these kids don't get the chance to experience the expression of their emotions. A lot of their home environments are just kind of a shutdown environment where, you just don't really speak of the trauma. You don't really speak of your emotions associated with the trauma because it's got a negative connotation. People will judge you. There's a stigma associated with it.
Right.
So, if we can sweep it under the rug, it'll eventually go away.
Right,
So this is
right.
a very new exploratory area for these children. And part of the Therapeutic Preschool's work is to also bring in the families. We know that you cannot do children's work without doing family work. The child is just a subset of the family unit. So in order to make long-term progress, you got to help these families feel better and heal in the process as well.
I was going to ask, at some 'cause the program you're talking about is with the children.
It has a
Just the
children's
children.
component. We also
But-
have a parent form.
But you have to talk about. That's what I was going to
Yes.
ask. And so, when does that meet up?
Yep. So they meet twice a month. We have one time that the parents all meet together as a group with a master's level therapist, and we talk about what's called psychoeducation, understanding where the behaviors are coming from because of the trauma, how the parent or guardian can kind of support that process, how do they kind of guide those behaviors. And they meet as a group, so that kind of gives that peer support too with the
Okay.
guardian parents and
Parents
being able,
with other parents.
yes.
Okay.
And then they also meet with our master's level therapist once a month as well, individually, to kind of address those more specific issues that are going on with that individual child.
Wow.
And then the other thing I would also add is that the Helen Ross McNabb Center has done a really excellent job of staying on top of research that we know, they call it evidence-based practices. So we've got all of our master's level folks trained in those practices that we know really work for this population, this age range, for trauma, and those interventions are part of the therapeutic preschool process. So we know that being able to provide those, we have a better outcome in the long run if those things are provided versus just your general practices.
Well, you kind of know the questions to ask and what program. I mean, I know there's a lot of initial conversation that so you can kind of figure it out. But sometimes, I guess, a child is just say, deal with her. I don't know what to do. I mean.
Well, and it's overwhelming. I mean, parenting is overwhelming, and sometimes they're just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's okay to say.
Well, it's
because
very
sometimes
common to say that.
It takes a little while to figure it out. You know, we even as professionals, we have a great set of tools, but not every tool works the same way with each child. So it's a team effort. It's definitely a collaborative effort between the staff and the family to work through that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think you can just imagine being a parent in general is just overwhelming. So when you have that compounded with addiction issues, domestic violence, mental health issues that you've been struggling with, just financial issues, homelessness issues, you know, all that just adds to just being a parent.
Sure.
And you know, you want to say, and you truly mean, do something.
Please.
Please.
And
Yeah.
and I want to stress, because we said this in the first segment a little bit, is your intent is to improve, is to help, not to say this isn't working. I mean, you really, your whole goal is to make it right again as best as possible.
Yeah, and I think Kristin said it just great when she kickstarted the family, really, or the parent being you know, the person that knows this child the best. I mean, there's so much value in that perspective that I think people get lost in our field when they don't have that perspective.
Right.
Because as bad as a parent situation is, I guarantee they don't want to be there. You know?
Yeah,
I mean, if they had a choice, that's not going to be their choice. So really engaging the parent, making sure that they're as involved and as making them feel as special as you can in the process is just so important.
And helping them understand you're giving them tools to work through it all.
And that parent and guardian, I mean, they're a key to that child's success. Like, we can have that child there 3 times a week, and if we don't empower that parent and that parent-child relationship, then the child will just continue to need services and continue to need that support.
Sure, it's not
So
going to fix.
They're the key player in it, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley from the Helen Ross McNabb Center, the Therapeutic Preschool program. We've got a lot more to talk about. Thank you guys for being here. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, and we will deal with more in just a minute.
Settle down, it'll all be clear. No pain, no mind to the demons, they fill you with fear. Just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home. Sweet creature, running through the garden, oh, where nothing bothered us. But sweet creature, when I run out of road, you bring me home.
You're listening to Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith, and we've been having a phenomenal and intriguing conversation about the Helen Ross McNabb Therapeutic Preschool program. With me in the studio, Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley. Thank you so much, guys, for enlightening us, and we've talked a lot about how you guys help preschool-aged children and their families deal with issues that seem on the surface beyond their control. Tell me, we'll start with you, Mary. Why is this important?
Well, we know that in research really supports that this age range is just key and vital in brain development. What we know is that if you don't address the trauma initially, it's only gonna get worse as this child gets older. A lot of these families have, what we call cyclical issues with trauma, so it's very normal to them. These types of children, when they don't have an intervention that takes place early on, you see them continue to go through the systems like the Department of Children's Services.
Right. Well, the walls get thicker. I'm
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
The juvenile justice system, continued therapeutic interventions are needed, and a lot of them end up even self-medicating to some degree because they're not able to deal with the trauma that did impact them. We know that little brains can definitely heal with the appropriate intervention. The brain science is there to tell you that adverse childhood experiences, even though they happen, can be a healing process.
In order, especially to help others as you grow older. Right.
Exactly. That there is hope and that there is the ability to be very resilient through that process, especially when you're that young.
Wow. And Kristin, I know that you both of you are very passionate about what you do. Tell me, why do you think this is all so important?
Yeah, well, to build on what Mary was saying, what we know in the early years of childhood is that we have this moment in time, 0 to 5, to really lay a strong foundation with our children. And that doesn't mean that we're going to keep them in a bubble and keep them protected. Well, life's going to happen.
Sure.
But what we want to do is we want to introduce that child and their developing brain to positive experiences, positive interactions. So when that negative interaction happens, they are able to balance it. One way to think about it is we all have a mental levelness. So you think of like a wobbly table. What do you do to fix a wobbly table? You put something underneath the leg to kind of support it.
Right.
Those are our support systems. Those are our family, our friends, special services like the Helen Ross McNabb Center that kind of balance that. But what we want to do is create a strong foundation for that child to grow and develop. So what we know is if we can get in there early, when a child does experience a traumatic event, we can lay that foundation and restructure it so it's solid. So as they continue to grow and develop, they have somewhere to stand strong. They can learn. They can have great relationships. They can keep a job, and all those things. So that's kind of where my passion lies, is we want to get that foundation solid and even and strong so that we can add the walls, we can add the roof, we can add the plumbing and all of that still.
Oh, nice picture. Well, I've always said, and a lot of people say, it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. And being not a preschooler, my brain's not far from it, but you can choose either path. You can choose to really get angry and really be dark from a difficult situation, or you can look beyond it and reach out for help through faith, through other people. And you're giving them the tools to understand which path is important and which path to take. I mean, I don't, you deal with it a lot. The kids just don't understand, one, what's going on, and two, what choices they have.
Yeah. And children learn from their experiences. They learn how to interact with their world. We look at children when they're playing on a playground. Oh, they're just playing and having a good time. But, let's say they're playing pirates and Indians up there. They're also learning how to problem solve. They're learning how to interact as a team. They're learning how to work together to, save the treasure chest or whatever. And all of those things come into play. So if we don't expose our children to the options that they have of how to deal with their anger, how to deal with their sadness or their stressors, they will only know one way. And so
they'll just figure it out for themselves, right?
Yeah. So giving them those tools for them to interact. And I think us as adults in the community and interact with a child every day, we are responsible to give them those experiences and to give them those options and show them that, throwing something through the wall is not the only option to deal with anger.
Right.
We can go out here and go for a walk, or we can blow some bubbles, or, to release that angry feeling.
Well, I'm sure one thing parents are very nervous about, especially probably new parents, is to talk about it. And, people I know, they really don't want to call you. But what's the trigger? When should someone call you?
I think that can vary as well. It's probably up to the tipping point of where that family or that person really feels like they're at that end of the line. I think the stigma and the judgment that's attached to picking up the phone and realizing that something's just quite not right is difficult.
Or realizing that you just can't handle it.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
tough.
It puts a lot of pressure. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of shame associated with it, especially when there's child abuse and neglect as part of it. So what we want to do is just encourage, even if you don't know it's right or wrong, or if you don't know that whatever your situation is, if you just have questions, just pick up the phone and call. There's people there that can answer your questions. There's people there that can lead you in the right direction, that can give you additional information if it's not the Helen Ross McNabb Center and it's something else in the community that you might need. We just really want to provide a platform for somebody to be able to call in and us help them in any way that we can, whether it's validation, whether it's a referral, or whether it's bringing them in to the center to provide additional support and evaluate their situation. We want to make sure that anyone feels comfortable just picking up the phone. We know that's a huge, huge first step, and our goal would be to make sure that all that judgment that's associated with that is released when that moment happens for a family.
And that's a great point, because people aren't, they think if they call, then all of a sudden they're in the books, they're in the records, and everybody's going to be after me.
Exactly.
And that's not so. Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley from the Helen Ross McNabb Center, the Therapeutic Preschool program, such an important program to be able to help parents who may be at their wits' end or just don't understand what direction to go. We'll talk more in just a moment of how, in fact, to get in touch with them. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker.
Weight that you've been holding, faith that's been broken, ain't broken any longer, and you'll be stronger just around the corner, just around the corner. When you see broken beyond repair, I see healing beyond belief.
You're listening to Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker. Really glad to have you along. In the studio today with me has been and still is Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley from the Helen Ross McNabb Center, the Therapeutic Preschool program, and a fascinating and enlightening conversation we've had about what you guys do and how you help so many families. What I want to ask first is, used to be there were a lot of programs like this, a lot of preschool intervention and preschool help, and there's not anymore. You're the only one left.
That is correct. There was 23 across the state at one point, and when our Medicaid dollars shifted in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of programs couldn't sustain.
Right.
We've been lucky where our leadership has really believed in the process of early intervention and the impact that it can have on children, that we've really tried to diversify our funding and continue the program on for years.
Right.
Obviously, and just talking about it today, we know the impact that it can have long term. And
it's amazing. Well, and it also impacts the other programs you have, because hopefully they don't end up there.
Exactly.
You're trying to catch them early, which is amazing. Now, Kristin, who would they contact? How would they get in touch with you if they need help?
Sure, they can call our main line at the Helen Ross McNabb Center, that 865-637-9711, and ask for the Therapeutic Preschool. That will direct them to our program coordinator, who then in turn will get the process started for them.
And that could just even be for questions, anonymous questions, if they got their hands up in the air and said, I've got to have some help.
Much like Mary said earlier, just pick up the phone and we will get you in the right direction.
That's perfect. Now, Mary, how can somebody help this program?
We are open to any kind of assistance. We have lots of volunteers that come in and just help on the day-to-day functionings of the preschool. We have lots of volunteers that just donate time or food. We actually give the preschoolers 2 meals when they come through the preschool. We also, are open to, if anyone wants to do private donations. We've had lots of individuals in the community that just believe in the program, the types of children that it supports, and the long-term impacts that it has, and they donate specifically to that program. So there's a variety of ways that you can definitely help, and calling that same number and just kind of getting redirected to someone that can help you with options is also something that a community person can do.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys, for what you do. I know you're very passionate about it, and you're helping a lot of people.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Again, it's Mary Katsikas and Kristin Bradley from the Helen Ross McNabb Center, the Therapeutic Preschool program. Look it up. It's on. What's the website?
McNabbCenter.org.
McNabbCenter.org.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you again, guys, so much.
Thank you.
This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker. Please remember, God is not interested in you or anyone being broken. He has, through people, set up programs just like this to offer help, to offer understanding and clarity, and most importantly, He is there for strength, for guidance, for help, and miracles. God's glory shines as long as we look for it. If we close our eyes, it's really hard to see. I'm Tom Baker. This is Dealing with Life. We do this every single week. I pray that God's glory shines directly in front of you.
It's been